Hello, I'm Barry Daniel, and this is the podcast of the Middle Way Society. Our aim is to encourage a universal approach to living a more integrated, ethical life, avoiding dogma or any appeal to authority. Our guest today is Sukhema, otherwise known as Larry Butler. He's a poet and a publisher who teaches tai chi in healthcare settings and leads therapeutic writing groups for Lapidus Scotland and has helped establish Towards Transition Glasgow. He completed a facilitator training in the Work That Reconnects, WTR, with Maitrisara, Chris Johnstone and others in England. He co-led a WTR facilitator training course in Scotland with Jenny Mackewn. Sukhema has 30 years experience facilitating groups, and he's here to talk to us today about the art of doing nothing. Hello, Sukhema. Welcome to the Middle Way Society podcast.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, well, could you perhaps begin, Sukhema, by telling us a bit about your background and why you're interested and have chosen this topic today?
Well, the topic I've chosen is doing nothing, and it's a practice that I've been doing for a few years now. And it was suggested by a friend of mine when I was on a retreat, probably about 3 years ago. And we were on a retreat together, and we were given this name. I got this name Sukhema, which means he who is very peaceful and at ease. I translate it as he who is trying to be very peaceful and at ease. And my friend who's from Poland named Marjak, who's now named Kashantipala, his name means protector of patience. And when we were on this retreat together, he suggested that we practice doing nothing together, just sit and do nothing. And we started practicing together while on this retreat. And we practiced actually for 2 months, 2.5 months. And I just began to love the practice. And it sort of related to me about how I write poetry as well. Because it's sort of, I need to be in an empty place in order for poetry to come to me. So yeah, unless I sit and do nothing for a while, and some writers will sit and sharpen pencils, do various other things, make a cup of coffee. They don't do very much, but they're getting ready to deal with the empty page. But in order to tackle that empty page, they need to empty themselves first. And I feel I need to do that if poetry is going to come to me.
So you said this practice started with you on a retreat. I'm assuming there was meditation there. Is there how does your understanding of doing nothing differ with mindfulness meditation?
Well, quite often in a mindfulness meditation, you will sit with a vertical spine. You're encouraged to stay upright, stay alert, etc. Whereas the practice of doing nothing, I could be lounging, lying down, leaning against the trunk of a tree, and not trying to meditate, not trying to do anything, just being present, and even not even trying to be present. And it's letting go of any sense of goal orientation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously you find this helpful. Could you explain why it has been helpful for you and the other practitioners you mentioned?
Well, it's helpful partly because it gives a little bit of history. Many years ago, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. I didn't know it while I was growing up. I didn't learn to read till I was 18. And then probably later I was diagnosed with ADHD. And when my partner read a book called Driven to Distraction, she said, now I understand. It's like I'm completely, attracted. I can be easily distracted and pulled in different directions. And I have a tendency to chase after too many things, take on too many projects. And that practice of doing nothing is encouraging me to actually not take on so many projects. I have a little aphorism that I'm using at the moment, which is when I get a phone call or an email asking me to do something, whether it's lead a workshop, run a retreat, write a book, whatever it is, the first question I ask is, who else can do that?
Mm.
And I will, before answering yes or no, I will maybe consult with other people. I will think about it. And rather than my tendency, I've been self-employed all my life. I retired at the age of 18, and I've never had a job in my life. So being self-employed, if somebody rings up and says, would you like to do something? I'll pay you to do it. I tended to say yes, because I don't know if they might not ask again, or they'll ask somebody else, and then they'll get, so that's a little bit of history of why you get into a habit as a self-employed person to take on things. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. It also sounds, in a sense, like it's almost like your relationship with time in some ways has changed as well.
Yes, it has. Yeah. Well, I put it this way: it hasn't changed; it's changing.
Yeah.
Gradually changing, and that's all we have is the change. Change is happening, but it doesn't. Even though I've been practicing doing nothing for probably a couple of years now, fairly regularly, I hardly miss a day when I don't stop and practice.
I'm thinking about my own experience and what events in my life recently, and I see some correlation here. For me, perhaps it's more about slowing down. I certainly relate to the idea of saying no more, or can someone else do it? I mean, I had a guest house for many years, and
I know, I remember.
yeah, and unwillingly, to a large extent, for a period, and in many ways, my life was ruled by almost the sentence, "I need to get back." Whenever I was away from the guest house with my partner or whatever, you're always aware that the phone could ring any time to say, that someone can't get in their room or whatever, and so you're very beholden to time. And what's really nice now that we've left is that we've really sort of developed a different relationship with time. Notice we're one of these annoying people now that when we're driving, we're always in the slow lane, and we're at we're going about 55 miles an hour on the motorway. But that just feels really nice, and I really like the idea of and I notice other things now. I'll just sit downstairs when I make my breakfast and just sit and have my breakfast rather than bringing it up here in front of the computer. and the breakfast being almost secondary to the stimulation from all the social media and etc. I was just wondering what you another experience I had from a retreat. I don't know how this relates to what you're talking about, but the first time I ever went on a silent retreat, I came across the concept of feeling tone. If anyone out there, feeling tone is this. Imagine if you're on a scale and 10 is ecstasy and -10 is agony. Say when you're a teenager, you're probably +7, -7. You're on this oscillation, and I'm in my 60s now. I might be +3 or -3. But when you're on a retreat, you spend a lot of time in neutral feeling tone, and it really feels like doing nothing. And but also, until I went on that retreat, I'd associated that neutral feeling tone with boredom. But actually, when you sit with that, and and you're there a long time, and as you say earlier, not just in the formal meditation position, but just sat out in the garden or whatever, sat in your bed, you were with neutral a lot of the time. And you actually think this is quite pleasant. And that was really, really helpful me in my life when I came back. I was less prone when in the doctor's surgery to reach for that glossy magazine. I was quite content to just sit there doing nothing. Does that resonate with you?
It certainly does. And when I what I feel is there is an art in doing nothing. I think did I send you the poem, The Art of Doing Nothing, that I wrote?
Uh,
I'm not sure if I did, but
no, I don't think you did. No, but
I'll read it in a moment. But what I want to say is that it is an art and it is a practice, and it's not easy. And I've just been reading this book. I'm 2/3 the way through it. It's called The How to Do Nothing.
okay.
And it's not easy. I mean, I have a precept that I've been using for a number of years. Go slow, arrive early. Now, but invariably, I'm suddenly haven't turned off the computer. My Tai Chi class is starting in 10 minutes. Woo, I start rushing and riding my bike really fast to get there in time to teach Tai Chi. And which, of course, Tai Chi is a practice about going slow. And I've said, and the fundamental rules, the fundamental art of Tai Chi is the art of doing nothing.
Yeah.
Allow things to come to you, allow things to just happen, unfold naturally. So it's like, but it's not an easy practice, and I'm still learning. And let me share a poem with you. I'll just read it. The poem is called A Lesson in Music by Alistair Reid, who was really one of the best translators of Pablo Neruda's work. But this is his own poem. It's called A Lesson in Music. Play the tune again, but this time with more regard for the movement at the source of it and less attention to time. Time falls curiously in the course of it. Play the tune again, not watching your fingering, but forgetting, letting flow, the sound till it surrounds you. Do not count or even think. Let go. Play the tune again, but try to be nobody, nothing, as though the pace of the sound were your own heart beating, as though the music were your face. Play the tune again. It should be easier to think less every time of the notes, of the measure. It is all an arrangement of silence. Be silent, then play it for your pleasure. Play the tune again, and this time, when it ends, do not ask me what I think. Feel what is happening, strangely, in the room, as the sound glooms over you, me, everything. Now, play the tune again.
Beautiful.
And I say the same thing with my Tai Chi students. Play the form again. Play the movement again.
Yeah, that's it. That's really interesting. We touched on this earlier, just before the talk, Sukhema, because I was thinking. So, what you seem to be talking about as well is often, described as flow or and then the great example of music. So, it's, if you think of an artist who's going to give a concert, well, the first thing they do, they have to learn the piece, and that that requires analysis, and it's sort of you are in a sense doing there, but the actual performance, if the artist starts thinking about their fingers, then it'll go, it will all go to pieces. And so I think that poem expressed that that beautifully. So I'm just trying to pin this down. So it's not that doing nothing is not just sat against a tree and doing nothing. It's you can actually be engaged in an activity, like, as you mentioned, Tai Chi or music or potentially anything, but it's what?
It's where, I mean, I think it's where how you place your attention. One of the subtitle of the book I showed you is Resisting the Attention Economy. So if you think about all the things that are pulsing towards us, in terms of online stuff, walking down the street, radio, television, whatever it is, we're bombarded with all sorts of things. And how do you resist that? How do you transcend that continuous bombardment? And I think there's a need for things like key words for me: incubation, hibernation, pause, allowing things to flow through you rather than, taking it in.
Yeah. I imagine that must be very hard for some people. I mean, I'm just thinking of a friend of mine. She's just at the point when she wants to retire, but she's also very fearful of retirement because she's not practiced in meditation, and she's very fearful of boredom. What would you suggest that she did? I know your first thing is to say go to a tai chi class in it, but in a more broader sense, her orientation.
Well, yeah, you and I both know a man named Jonathan Green.
Yeah,
who's coming up for retirement as well. He's leaving his job quite soon. And when I heard about it and he talked about it at a group and his feelings around it, I asked him, could you write about that for me? And I just published what he'd written in a book that I just edited and published called What's Missing, from the book I edited called Living or Dying. And I would recommend she reads what he's written. It's very interesting on how he's managing letting go. How do you let go of what you've been doing for years and years in an organization, an institution, whatever? How do you let go of that and begin something else? And what do you want to begin? And how are you going to begin? And maybe you need a period of hibernation, incubation, a period of cocooning before that butterfly arises, before the new person of what you want to become becomes to rise up. But I think there's a need for a transition from one state of being into another state of being. Particularly, we've developed all sorts of, a person like your friend has developed all sorts of ways of being, habits that may need to change.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, interesting though. She's really recently joined an art class, and this has been a really pleasant surprise for her. That because the kids have left the nest, and I think that's part of her fear, because a lot of her meaning that she derived from life was her family, and I think she devoted very little time to her how she could really explore the world, but she's starting to do that now. So maybe that's she's potentially found a start there anyway. Something that
it sounds like she has. Yeah. Great. The other aspect of this, I think our culture as human beings, particularly in our Western culture, but probably throughout the world, because a lot of the cities look all the same. We're addicted to speed. We're addicted to moving faster and keeping up and consuming more. There's a song, I'm not sure if I can play this song for you, whether you could hear it or not. It's called Consume, Doom, Doom. I'm in a choir called Protest in Harmony. Okay. And we often sing on marches, events, XR things, water aid, workers' rights days. And around Christmas time, we often go to shopping malls and sing Christmas. They sound like Christmas carols, but when you come up close to us, they're not Christmas carols at all. They're encouraging people to consume less. Here it is. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. Here's the main part.
Walking down the high street with my takeaway. Consume, doom, 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 consume, doom, doom. Send it to the landfill and have a nice day.
Consume, doom, doom, consume, doom, doom. Yeah, biograde. Yeah, it's all man-made. Yeah, it's all badly paid. Consume, doom, doom, consume, doom, doom.
Take away, throw away, take away, throw away, take away,
throw away, take away, throw away, take away, throw away, take away, throw away. Up.
Walking down
the high street, I saw the light. Consume, doom, doom, consume, doom, doom. Look into the future and had a fright. consume, doom, 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 consume, doom, doom, doo-da, yeah, looking bad, doo-da, yeah, in the hundreds of mad. What's happened to the earth we had? Consume, doom, 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 consume, doom, doom.
Take away, throw away,
Take away, throw away, take away, throw away, take away, throw away, take away, throw away, take away, throw away, stop.
Walking down the high street with my takeaway. Consume, doom, 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 consume, doom, doom.
Send it to the landfill and have a nice day. Consume, doom, 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 consume, doom, doom. Doo-da, yeah, won't biodegrade. Yeah, it's all man-made. Doo-da, yeah, the workers are badly paid. Consume, doom, 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 consume, doom, doom.
Very interesting. Yeah, that very, very true. That reminds me to some extent of a book called The Dawn of Everything. I don't know if you've heard it.
I've heard of it. I never read it though. Yeah.
Okay, it's by David Wengrow and David Graeber. Well, one's an archaeologist, one's an anthropologist, and it's it's basically talking about the start of civilization. Well, a lot of the book, and but one of the interesting things I found that was related in some ways to this song is that shortly after the conquest, you know, in inverted commas, of the new world, there was a serious attempt by the clerics over there to try and convert the indigenous people who were living over there. But in order for them to do that, they had to learn the languages of the indigenous people, and there were lots of actually conversations between often a lot of Jesuit priests and the indigenous people, and these conversations were written down, and they became known as the indigenous critique, because there was a lot fed back about, for the first time perhaps, about, you know, the Western view of things, and this critique was discussed quite a lot in the tea houses of the sort of 17th century, and the thrust of it was that they thought that we were extremely squabbly, acquisitive, and whilst we had stuff, they said that they were, and related to what you're talking, they felt rich in the sense that they were time rich and ease rich, and they didn't need all this stuff because they it's similar, like, you know, I don't know if you've heard of Steven Pinker.
I have heard of Steven Pinker.
Yeah, well, he argues that, you know, in that you know, the world is getting better, but and one of the tropes that from this argument, the world is getting better, is that you know, it's brought a lot of people out of poverty. But if you analyze that a bit more deeply, it's because a lot of people who were indigenous people who didn't have any money, and often didn't feel the need any money, and because they were time rich and ease rich, but they were sold this thing. Oh, you promised the earth with you can have all, you know, and they were lured into the idea of modernity. But where did they end up? They ended up in slums. You know, okay, they got a wage, but in a sense, they'd lost everything.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the quotes that my favorite quote, I first saw it, a woman named Linda France. I don't know if you know Linda.
No.
She and I have run retreats together a number of times. She's a poet, and for the last 3 years, she's been the climate emergency writer in residence in Newcastle University. And I've employed her to run a facilitator course for writing for well-being called Writing the Climate. How do you write about the climate? And she's now produced a manual as well. But I was in her house, and she lives near Newcastle, several months ago now. And I saw on her kitchen wall this quote by a Jesuit priest who you probably are familiar with, named Thomas Merton.
Yep.
And this quote I really love. And so I had to have it. And I put it on I have it on my wall now at home, which is, and I'll read it to you. There is a pervasive form of contemporary violence to which the idealist most easily succumbs: activism and overwork. The rush and pressure of modern life are a form, perhaps the most common form, of its innate violence. To allow oneself to be carried away by a multitude of conflicting concerns, to surrender to too many demands, to commit oneself to too many projects, to want to help everyone in everything, is to succumb to violence. The frenzy of our activism neutralizes our work for peace. It destroys our inner capacity for peace. It destroys the fruitfulness of our own work, because it kills the root of inner wisdom, which makes work fruitful. So that's Thomas Merton. And I when I read that in the kitchen, I immediately said, can you send me it? And now I have it in big letters by my bed as a reminder, because in some ways I identify with that quote. I tend to overwork, I tend to take on too many things, et cetera, which comes back to the whole practice of doing nothing.
Doing nothing. How do you frame that in terms of the crises that humanity and the world is experiencing at the moment? Because we're talking about a different form of activism there. How do we respond to that in the frame of doing nothing?
Well, I mean, it's like I've been supporting a lot of activists in Just Stop Oil project, and I've been doing it by providing them with a space to do nothing. And we meet online, and I do a little grounding exercise with them, grounding meditation, and we sit and we don't do anything for a while. We have some check-in times to see how they're doing, but it's not about planning their next action. It's not about doing anything. It's about having a breathing space, having time to rest, time to recuperate. And unless you do that, you're going to be useless out on the streets. Whatever action you're taking, whether you're an activist getting arrested, whether you're campaigning, delivering leaflets, whatever you're doing, whether you're a witness, if you don't practice resting and recuperating and you just keep going on, then you're going to become useless. So that's my argument around the current crisis, is that we do need lots and lots of more people actively engaging in the crisis that human beings are facing these days, whether it's climate change, whether it's the oil, whatever it is. They're all interrelated. And there's no time. There is no time because we are too busy. Could we live longer doing nothing? Can we be more effective doing nothing? Nothing's harder than doing nothing. Nothing's easier than doing nothing. Yet we need more time. We need more time growing our courage to wait and see what happens next. It's like somehow we often don't wait. We don't wait to really listen to what's going on and what is my passion? What do I want to really do, and how effective can I be? And I think often people jump too quickly towards solutions.
Yeah.
And anyway, no one ever dies from doing nothing.
I went down to London last week, and there was for Earth Day, and there was I think over the weekend there was about 100,000 people there.
Yeah, I read about it. Yeah.
But there was very little in the press, and I have this sort of conflict whether you should do something in terms of direct action or not. But I've also been impacted by the I don't know if you've heard someone called Margaret Wheatley.
Oh yes, yeah.
she talks about islands of sanity.
Yes, that's right. I've looked on her. She has a website, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yes, I've been on their website.
And she suggests that sometimes we're born into the end of a world, or the ending of a world, and maybe you can't save it. She sort of asked the question, well, what could you do? What would be the good things to do? And it's like sort of trying to, she calls it create islands of sanity, or
That's right.
or good ruins, so maybe the practice of doing nothing could be part of that.
Well, if you think about it in terms of, I mean, in some ways, I've read about her islands of sanity. It reminded me of the 50s and 60s, when people so-called dropped out, went to the land, created little communes and things like this. Some of them lasted, some of them fell apart, but that they reminded me of what she's talking about, islands of sanity. But if you think of permaculture and the art of permaculture, the first thing you do if you get a piece of land, you don't do anything. You just observe it for a year, it's recommended. So you see all seasons and you watch and see what is the land. Don't try and see what do I want to do with the land. What is the land asking of me? What is the land saying to me? Listen to it, observe it, and then maybe take some action, but only after doing nothing for a year.
Yeah. So you're talking about doing nothing often as a practice in order to be able to do something more integratively, more effectively,
more creatively.
Yeah. So you're not dissing doing something, just that you're saying that all we seem to do is be doing something, and that's unhealthy.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's the practice for me. I did an experiment over between Christmas and New Year for 7 days. I went every day to my allotment and just sat there and did nothing for about 20-25 minutes. And then I gave myself time to write after 20 minutes of doing nothing. And then I made a commitment that I would go home and make it into something. And I did. And they became a sequence of triangle poems shaped like a triangle. And so now I'm working on a little pamphlet of triangle poems. And they're arising out of doing nothing.
Have you got one to hand?
I could screen share one of them, yeah. And I just love the process of finding these poems and seeing what they happen. And often they wrote themselves rather than me writing them. I'll read the one called Change. Change of mind, change of wind, from east to west. Now the shelter no longer shelters from rain. River swells, nearly overflows, with more sirens today. Eyes close, longing to sleep and dream, droop again. But here comes the sun, a first glimpse in days, glistening sycamore and elder trunks, and distinct, ever-changing cloud stories framed in cobalt blue, severed by a single line of white jet spume, with high-pitched wind whistling through wire, with a wish for the light to last longer before the dark bank of gray pulses closer to the shimmering polytunnels, plastic stretched to almost split. Will you go home now, or wait till the storm passes? Wait for your bones to grow cold, your brain change. And that is all down the left-hand margin, and it begins with 1 syllable, then 2 syllables, then 3 syllables, then 4 syllables, then 5 syllables, etc. And then it reaches a peak of about 10 syllables, then goes down to 1 syllable.
Fantastic. Oh, well, I'll put it on the. I'll show it so people can see that.
Yeah,
that's great, Sukhema. Listen, Sukhema, we're coming towards the end of the interview, but one question I always ask people who come on the podcast. The middle way, as we understand it in the society, is this idea that by avoiding fixed or absolute beliefs about things, that sort of throws you back into the messy, uncertain world of experience. So, but however, it's arguably in that messy, uncertain middle that we can perhaps get to grips more adequately with the phenomena that we encounter. So, how if I don't know if you familiar with the middle way. I think you are, but how might that relate to what we've been talking about today?
Well, for me, when I think about the middle way, I think about what I describe in my Buddhist practice, whether it's meditation or everyday life, is what I call balanced effort. And I think that sense of finding the middle way is finding that sense of balance, that sense of poise, where I can deeply relax even while doing something. And I can receive much more effectively the gifts that come my way. A little poem I wrote on my 70th birthday, which is nearly 10 years ago, when I had been walked up with some people, some friends, several mountains near my 70th birthday in the Cairngorms. You weren't at that particular trip, but you've been on one with me before.
Yeah.
And I went back and decided I'd spend my 70th birthday alone in Carbath at a hut where I go to write. And I just spend the day alone. And I told my partner that I was going to do that. And then at the end of the day, the sunshine, she told me she was going to bring a meal for me in the evening. And suddenly I hear like a samba band coming my way. And there's all my children, my grandchildren, my granddaughter, several friends, including people like James Hawkins and his wife, Catero. They all came marching in, playing musical instruments. And Ratna Devi saw my face. She thought I was going to have a heart attack. And afterwards, I wrote this poem called What Matters.
Okay.
Let me tell you how words sometimes don't matter, as when gestures connect need with need. Then giving is receiving, receiving, giving. It's all about change, how blank faces light up when you get what you want without asking. And I believe that when I think of the middle way, I think that I begin to receive things without actually seeking them. When I find that sense of balance and poise in myself, I feel that I'm open to receive, but I'm also open to giving.
Yeah. That's really lovely. That poem made me think of, sometimes people who go to a funeral and they're really worried what to say to the person who's bereaved, but all they really want is you to just be there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And fully be there. Yeah.
And what was interesting for me on that 70th birthday, which is now almost 10 years ago, was that there was a photograph taken by a woman who's co-owns the hut with me. And she photographed me blowing out candles with my granddaughter, who was about 2 years old at the time. And at the side of the photographs was my former wife and my current wife, Ratna Devi. And it was the first time they'd been together. And they were both smiling as I was blowing out the candles on the cake.
Oh, lovely.
And in a way, that was the gift that I didn't expect to get.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we talked earlier. We thought what would be perhaps really nice is to finish off the podcast with a guided meditation from Ratna Devi.
Would you read it? I'd love you to read it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, what I'll do first, actually, I'll just say thank you very much for doing the podcast today, Sukhema. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, been a pleasure seeing you again too.
Okay, so I'll just read this out and then we'll
read it slowly. Read it slowly.
Okay. Getting a general sense of arriving in the body, in this place. A few deeper breaths help us to be grounded and settled. A sense of the earth, vast, and ancient, holding us. Becoming aware of the hands, where they are resting, what they are in touch with, air, skin, clothes. What is the energy in the hands like? Are they still expecting to do something? Letting the hands realize that now nothing needs to be done. Letting the feet know that now there is nowhere to go. Letting the face know that now there is nothing to communicate and nothing to hide from the world. Letting the belly be soft and get on with its business of digesting. It knows what to do. In the atmosphere of quietude, the heart might open naturally, like a flower when the conditions are right. Allowing a sense of belonging without having to do anything to prove our worthiness. When the urge to do, to ponder, to fix something arises, sensing the vitality of that energy. This is how life expresses itself. Let it brighten the moment. Perhaps your breath can ride that energy, tame it with ease, channeling it into contentment. If it feels right, we may drop in the question of being versus doing. How is it playing itself out for us right now? Is it about both or neither? Sitting with ease for as long as feels right. You can find out more about Middle Way philosophy at www.middlewaysociety.org.